Welcome to Silence, where we explore the alchemy of disciplines, practices, and beliefs that get us to our best thinking, insights, and creativity. Now, on to the show. All right, José Reyes, thank you for being here today.
Rob Forrester, thank you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming in. I've been really excited about this conversation as we were talking offline, just that you are a full-on, full-blooded creative. The rest of us peer into that space and want to learn more. I know I do, because I just get to dabble in it, and you really live that worldview. So I'm interested in dive into that. You want to start by just giving us a little bio, who you are and what you do?
Sure.
And then, whatever part of your story you want to tell.
Yeah. I was born in Puerto Rico, and my dad was in the military. And
is that right? I didn't know that.
He was, yeah. He was in the Air Force, and that's a big part of my story. He was also born in Puerto Rico as well as my mom, and he joined the military, and then we moved around a lot as a kid. So I moved around up until the age of 10, and then he retired, and we ended up in Tampa, Florida.
Okay.
And then through a whole series of events, ended up going to art school in Savannah.
At SCAD.
At SCAD, that's right. And then from there,
and that was back when it was.
Oh, it was so sweet and cute.
Yeah, it's not like the big Atlanta building you see that hovers over the highway.
No, not at all. They didn't own as much of Savannah as they do now, downtown. But it was still a fantastic school. It was way more intimate. It felt like an art school. It was very raw, and we had fewer buildings, and it was a great formative experience. And so I really only have sort of come in to appreciate that probably within the last maybe decade or so, where I've become more involved at SCAD, but also seeing its name having much more recognition and people actually being like, oh, you went to SCAD. And they've done a great job at marketing themselves and promoting the school, and doing a great job of actually building a school that really does promote creativity. And what they're doing there, I think, is fantastic. So I've really,
and it seems like, as the world has become more and more content, dare I say more and more creative, but where I feel like there's more creativity, and, with the internet and social media, it's like on display more. And with movies, I know have played into the, it's like they've become a force, it seems.
They really have.
Like they intersected the trend of where creativity and artists were breaking out of like here, and now it's like everywhere and online, and you're seeing it. Yeah,
they've embraced this idea of like it's the school for creative careers.
Yeah.
And certainly anybody from my generation going to art school and needing to convince your parents that you want to go to art school, and they're really worried that you're going to have a career out of that, or are you just going to be impoverished and poor? And so we had to do a lot of convincing. My brother certainly came to bat for me. But
Is he in the creative space?
No. So my whole family is in the military.
Okay.
Wow. So, right. So I'm the little bit of I wouldn't say the black sheep, but I'm the odd man out.
Yeah.
But so he really came through for me at a time where I needed that, and to convince my parents, especially my father. And so going to art school, it meant a lot to me to be able to do that. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And like I said,
and when did you know? I like to hear this part of the story. Like, when did you know, like, hey, creativity is going to be a big piece of my life?
I knew when I went and visited it, because I was floundering and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted. And so I had gone to the University of South Florida thinking that I was going to go into like civil engineering. I actually like math. And so I thought, well, this seems something that's maybe adjacent to art. But there weren't, I didn't have the language and the framework to put around that I liked art and what could that mean as a career. And not many people really knew or understood that. And so I think that's actually one of the things that SCAD has done a great job at, is actually being very clear and be able to put language around this field. And so they've grown by leaps and bounds because it's accessible, it makes sense. And I think people understand that you can actually make a career out of it. But before all of that, it really was a time period where there was real concern if you were a parent sending your kid to art school,
Sure.
if it was just a waste of money or not.
Sure.
But I knew, because I was going to the University of South Florida and I wasn't doing great. In fact, I failed a couple of classes and I had to go to community college. And that was very painful for me. And so I visited a friend of mine who had gone straight to art school, and I spent a week up there just going to his classes and hanging out. And I knew immediately that first class that we went to, it was a 3D class, and the project was to make a sofa out of cardboard that could support two people without using any adhesives, tape, anything like that to hold it together. And I was just watching the whole class do their thing, and I'm like, this is my thing.
Yeah.
I've got to do this.
Yeah.
Now, I mean,
A little bit of the engineering in that one.
well, right.
Yeah.
And just a way of process and how do you make things. And so I did a lot with my hands growing up, just through like making things. And so I didn't know, like somebody may have said, well, you should go into industrial design, perhaps, but that wasn't a thing. That wasn't actually a thing that what was even on the curriculum at the time. But I, believe it or not, this same friend, we were best friends in middle school and high school, and we were really nerdy about design. And I think we didn't have a name for this field. We just did it naturally. And that's actually one of the things that is something that I've learned over time, is just when people ask me about, their kids and, creativity, and is that something that they should go into? My answer to that is just watch your kids and observe them, and whatever they're doing in their free time that you're not asking them to do, that they're doing because they're enjoying it. There's a good case to be made that that's where they want to spend their time, all of their time. That's where their passions lie. That's where they'll become more, I think they will expand in their world. And so it may be adjacent to that. It doesn't necessarily mean like, well, if your kid's playing with Legos, that they should go and work for Lego. Right. It just means that there's something there that they're being lost in terms of their imagination, and it's worth investing in. It's worth looking at. And so that's, as I look back at my life, certainly I spent a lot of my time, laying on the floor, playing, doing things with music, working with like typography, weirdly memorizing type names and making things with typography. No one asked me. No one's like, hey, I think you should do this. I just did it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So fast forward, I graduated from.
Wait, and real quick, was there a moment like having to convince your parents? I mean, I imagine this military family, hey, he wants to go to art school. I don't know. Was there anything in there or like?
I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, my parents were very, very practical, and my dad joining the military, everything that he did had a real pragmatic point of view.
Yeah.
And so he often tried to convince us all that we needed to go into the medical field in some way because he had done that. And so he saw opportunity in that. And so he kept on trying to convince us that we should do that, and that it's a sure thing. Go in the military, they'll take care of you, they'll send you to school, and there's a route. There's like, when you know what the path is, it's an easy path to champion.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what you're going to get, you're like, I'm not sure that's the right thing. Yet many people have done that. And so, we have to be careful about that too, with our own kids, where they may show aptitude for something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to really lean into that. We want to see that over time, or to go, this was the path for us. And so therefore they should take and pursue this path because, we know how it works basically. And so, so they convincing my dad, it took my middle brother to go in and finally convince my dad to do this thing. And so I'm forever indebted to him in doing that.
Good brother.
Really good brother. So after he did that, my father was finally like, okay, you can go and do this. I was kind of off to the races, and college works. I draw from a lot of sources, David Brooks being one of them, and he talks a lot about school and how that is a great testing ground, and it works out a lot of kinks as a young person. And it puts you in next to peer groups, and it puts you in all these different situations that you wouldn't normally be in your everyday life if you were at home. And so it worked. It really did work for me, and it helped align me, to these things that I wanted to do. So it wasn't that I was, lacking in will or desire to work hard. It's just I wasn't doing the thing when I was at home, and so I was not sort of in my thinking wavelength.
And did you come alive at SCAD?
Absolutely.
Had that moment of the couch class just on repeat?
Yeah, I did. And, there were classes that, you sort of respond to more than others,
right.
And that's sort of natural. But there was also a part of, just your own personality that you have to get outside of and get around. And so I had a lot of sort of pride and ego around like knowing what I wanted to do at that point, and then believing that I had a path towards that. And, I think so much of life is just getting out of the way of your ego and just dying to that, like just trash it. Mm-hmm. It just gets in the way of everything. Mm-hmm. And I think primarily, ego there's so much fear that's caught up in that. And so, it's taken a lifetime to kind of get a handle on how it actually works and how I see it at work in my life, and making choices to help avoid that.
All right, so you jumped right in the deep end. So let's talk about
this.
Well,
look, I know we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah, no, that's great. Curious, how do you get your ego out of the way? Uh-huh. And then how do you think it holds you back, or how have you found?
I think I'll sort of answer the second part of that question. I think it holds me back because it's deeply embedded in fear. For me, certainly. And I've really come to see that when I want my sort of deep desires of either being known or seen to come up, and I want that, I'll do other things to get there. So I'll take kind of a hold of the stick and try to steer. Mm-hmm. And usually bad things come out of that, especially sort of in the way they make me feel. And so,
because you're trying to force it,
because you're trying to force something, this has ramifications all over the place. So right. Whether it's at work and something's not working exactly, and so you feel like you need to take control, or you need to do additional things in order to make things happen, whether that's like pitching work or new business or anything like that, and so that's usually fear at play, because something isn't happening as quickly as you think it ought to, or you're looking aside, or you're looking next to the next person, and maybe they're doing something that is like, wow, they're really like doing well, and it looks like we're doing the same thing, and so you can really get into this sort of comparison sort of mentality, and that's so dangerous, especially as a creative. Because that's where sort of copying comes in, and that's where I think, especially now, just with seeing everybody's creating and everybody's trying to say something, and everybody believes the thing they have to say is really important, and so therefore everyone needs to say it. And we're really at sort of this point where to be authentic is really difficult, because to be authentic means to sit outside of all of these other narratives, and as opposed to what we end up doing is chasing to keep up with everything else. And so we're just doing what everybody else is doing.
Yes.
And we're not actually making anything new.
Yes. Well, I don't want to belabor this because my audience has heard me talk about it some, but well, one, just the authenticity, and this book behind me, the Rick Rubin's book, I love how he talks about that. Mm-hmm. But two, yeah, I've wrestled with a few guests on this idea, particularly around the internet and social media, of like, and everybody has a bit of a different perspective, but it's like, is it good for creativity because everybody has this platform to show what they're doing, and it's like, oh, great, free expression, and we're all connected? Or is it bad in that everybody starts copying? Like, there's less truly original thought because it's easier to just see and copy and iterate, which I think I'd be curious on your perspective, because you hear like kind of copying's the highest form of flattery, and like a lot of work is derivative and whatever. But Yeah, it's like, are we getting the originality we used to when everybody was disconnected and kind of in their own little bubbles around the world?
Yep.
And then they were able to bring something forth that the world hadn't really seen, perhaps. I don't know. Do you have a strong feeling on?
I feel like it's also layered, and to pull this one string means you're pulling all the strings. And so it isn't just, and as you know, it's not just sort of one thing like, social media is the problem.
Right. Right.
And it's not, but it contributes to it.
Yeah.
But I do believe, because I grew up outside of that, and I spent hours and hours in my head imagining and taking the time to do that there's something that's really true about that. There's something that's lost when we're not able to spend that time. And I think I'm glad that you brought up Rick Rubin, because I think a lot of how I think has come together in sort of the writings of, the David Brookses of the world and Rick Rubin's. And there's another book by Adam Moss, who used to be the editor-in-chief of New York Magazine. And what they've sort of discovered through what they've learned and as they've talked to other creatives. And so I think the sense of what it takes to be truly creative are these practices. And they're practices like solitude. They're practices that are, how do we expand our imagination, engaging in conversation, deep conversation, just making something even if it's bad. Which are all really important things to the process. And
Say a minute more about that. I feel like there's a nugget there.
Which thing?
Making something even if it's bad.
Yeah, I think that to me it's such an integral part of the creative process, because it requires you to be willing to fail. And it's part of the thing of making. I think one of the areas in which we've lost the willingness to give ourselves margin to fail. So we have limited time to make it right and to make it perfect. So the first instance, we have to do it right, or we're not good at the thing. And I see that a lot with young people in particular, where there's an unwillingness to go down the road of the practice of it, of the iteration, of the revisions, of being in it, sort of the grit of it, of being creative. And it means going back and forth and spending time stepping forward and backward. And the thing with doing something, even if it's bad, is it actually forces you to think critically. This gets back to that idea. And so if we're just work on collage. I really like doing collage work, and I love music. So something that's been really great this past year is I finally have put some of that into practice. So, we started basically a vinyl listening night where we invite a small group of people, and it's really just about the art of listening to music and the conversations that come through that, because it's an answer to a question that I get all the time. People know that I love music, and I spend a lot of time thinking about music, reading music essays. But a lot of people don't know how to find good music, or they don't even know that good music's even being made anymore. And so as a way of sort of like music appreciation, doing that, but then by creating a night around it, that requires leading people through a series of gates around what's important about this music. How does the music get stitched together? Is there an overarching theme? What are the important themes that we want to talk about? All of those things. So when we're not making something and then testing it, like doing the event forces you to test whether or not this is going to work or not.
Yeah.
And then what's amazing is that you end up, again, that's where the ego comes in, because the ego is fear of failure. And so it actually can keep us from doing things and trying things. And so what I've often found is that just say yes. Even if you don't have the answer, like if somebody's like, hey, should you be on my podcast about this thing, just say yes.
Yeah.
And then kind of like move into it later and then spend time doing it. And so that's where I feel like that part when we're failing and then we're going back and just starting to make something, it forces us to think critically about the thing.
Yeah. What a great observation. Yeah. Again, it seems like because of internet, social media, we have this a bit of a performance culture. Everybody's got to be perfect and get it right. And I think the reality is you talk to any like influencer and they have to take a gazillion photos to get the right one.
Right.
So there is that pain behind the scenes, but it doesn't look like that. And so everybody thinks it's got to be perfect the first time. And we should stop because I think I interrupted you before you got here is that, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a creative director at how do you categorize Metal Leap?
Yeah. So I would say that Metal Leap is a design agency.
Okay.
And so for the last 23 years, we've really been about kind of design as a way that helps shape culture. And it actually gives life to people. It brings meaning when we're able to draw people to beauty, order, and that we've been really purposeful with that. And so we've really actually seen over time creativity as being a resource to be stewarded because we really believe that great design can be transformative. It can be restorative to people, and it's not just us making something to make something. And so we've done a move in and around being intentional around agency life, our lives, my personal life. And when I think about it, I kind of think about it a little bit like a brand where, a brand really it's a resource to be stewarded as well. And it needs to, whatever we're doing needs to be purposeful and intentional. And it needs to speak to whatever the sort of the big idea is. And so in the same way, because I work with my wife and we've been doing this thing for so long, it's been really important that we're not just doing work to do work. What is it that we're doing? We're asking questions like, is what we're making worthwhile? Does it matter? And that helps us narrow in our focus around the work that we want to be doing. And so we've been doing this work with nonprofits and for-profits for 23 years, designing and working on branding, publication design, and packaging.
Yeah. Well, and thank you. That's helpful for context. But I also, it was sparked when you were talking about the younger generation because you get to hire, mentor, develop so many young creatives in what you get to do. So you mentioned a little bit, but I'm curious, are there other themes, trends you're seeing in young creatives, good or bad or other? And just, I don't know, the latest and greatest creative movement in society. I mean, you're really in touch with that.
I think that one of the things that I'm seeing more than ever is a real sense of fear, because it's caught up with the expectation that we need to be seen as succeeding all the time, and that we need to be doing that quickly. And so whether that's moving from job to job, whether it's especially with just younger creatives, there is a real sense that they're on a course towards something, but they don't know what the something is. And it's what's next. And so they're just sort of, but they don't have real answers for that. And so if they see their peers and their peers are ascending very quickly, whether it's job title or money, there is a real sense of, I guess I need to be doing that as well, or I'm not succeeding. And I think what that can do is it can undermine the creative. It can undermine the thing that they're really built to do by misordering sort of the objectives, And when you're a creative, when you're doing that well, you're asking really big questions. You're really trying to find nuance and complexity in things. You're putting together ideas that matter, how they make sense to the world. When you're looking askance to see what everyone else is doing, you're kind of running together, but you're running towards a destination that's not, nobody knows what the destination isn't to be, I want to be an amazing creative. And what does that mean to me exactly? It's, I need position, I need title, and I need money. And I mean, you really can't blame people because it takes stopping and just taking a beat and thinking and doing a little bit of self-reflection and analysis around, what am I here to do? What gives me great joy? What gives me peace? Why should I be doing the thing that I'm doing anyway? and those sort of big questions. The challenge is that, as David Brooks says, these aren't bad things, right? Especially in his book, The Second Mountain. The first mountain really is about like conquering and sort of like destroying that first mountain. You're like, I've got this. And you've got all this raw energy and you have all this enthusiasm and you're just like, everyone's like, it's like when they kind of lined everybody up in sort of Oklahoma and they like say, go and get the land grab. And everyone's just running in all these directions to go get like their acres of land. And there's sort of that sort of idea. And it's not until you sort of get to this second mountain idea, which is, what does it all sort of mean? And what's the purpose behind this? And there must be something else. And so one of the things that I see is like an opportunity for people like us is to begin to lay that groundwork much sooner in their hearts and minds, so that they can get greater perspective sooner. So they're not waiting until they're in their 40s asking some of these big questions, but they're doing that a lot sooner.
The word that comes to mind to me is marinate. And because, we live in this on-demand culture now where everything needs to happen fast. And you get to see what your peers are doing and there's this pressure. And we've lost patience, I think. You think about cooking, and so often, like my wife was making something for Easter and it was so much better after marinating overnight, or you think about apprenticeship, how you used to apprentice under someone for years and years and years, before you really turn loose on the world. And we've lost the patience for that largely, and myself included. Like, patience is not one of my virtues. And yet, probably particularly in the artistic creative space, marinating, soaking it in, failing, just taking time to develop probably your perspective and your framework may actually lead you to the top, so to speak, faster than jumping from place to place. But there's this sense of like, you need to marinate in it, I would think.
Well, and I think in the marination comes the satisfaction, and there's a lot of simplicity in that as well. I was just talking to a friend of mine who was over the house, and he was looking at kind of our wall of books, and he was asking me about a book that's really inspired me. And one of those was The Agony and the Ecstasy. And it's really a story about Michelangelo's life. And it's really quite amazing. The book's riveting and it's fast paced. And you wouldn't think that
Agony and the Ecstasy.
You wouldn't think that this book would be that way.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing story about a person who, I think, if you're creative in any way, shape, or form, you'll see the frustrations that he had, but also the willingness and the determination to seek out answers, to be curious about his world. And then what is amazing to me is that he is one of the world's greatest artists, if not the world's greatest artist. And I would probably put him over Leonardo da Vinci. If someone were to ask, I'm like, well, I'm a creative. They were different, let's not do that. Let's not be comparative. But I think given the time that he lived, the lack of technology, and the amount of work that he created in his life, his life work, the body that we look at, is really about a dozen pieces. And he worked in all sorts of mediums. And so he spent time working on all these pieces, and he was apprenticed. And somebody saw something in him and really cultivated that and put him with the best teachers. That's a really difficult thing to do. Not everyone gets to do that. There's a certain level of genius that comes with that. He's not a prodigy necessarily. He's a genius. And you could say the same thing even about modern composers like Leonard Bernstein. Like, he's really a genius. But, and he's at the right time with the right place. And so that all of that talent gets cultivated. And, you can't have, 10,000 of those, but it's remarkable to see how many people want to be that level of like fame and acknowledgement in our world. And there just isn't room for that. And so how do we be content with our role, our place? And this is the thing that I think leads to the fear, especially in young people, is that there's a real desire to be known. And there's a real desire. They would never say fame, never. But there's an ego there that's driving that because, it's built out of fear.
And who would never say fame? So I feel like there's a lot of people out there want to be famous.
Well, I don't know. I think fame still has this sort of negative connotation to it.
Oh yeah, okay.
But I think, well, certainly
they want to be influential.
They do, and that's about being famous.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we have so much. Like, I have ideas, and let me get my ideas out there. But those ideas need to be cultivated. They need to be pushed. They need to be tested. Are you talking to people who are going to challenge your ideas? Is that helping you form new ideas out of those? What's sort of the order of operations to become somebody who's really critically thinking about how you actually think? It's a great test of this is this. And I think everyone can relate to this. So when you go to a restaurant and you eat a great meal, and then afterwards you're talking to those people about their great meal, and you go, well, that was wonderful. What was great about the meal? And almost immediately there's sort of a pause, and there's a lack of language that we have to be able to describe the things that we think are great, or to describe anything. There's really a poverty of language. And so what was great about the meal? Well, it was like, it was really good, and the pasta was really good. What made it really good? What was going on? Do you understand the ingredients and the process that goes into making the thing? And so we want to do things. We want to be experts about things that we have no deep knowledge of immediately. And so what does it look like to take the time to go, okay, well, you really like pasta. Have you ever made pasta? What is the simple ingredients that go into that? And so that's one of the things that we'll talk a lot about, especially with like young creatives, is that there's a real sense that we've learned something in a very short amount of time. Therefore, we've mastered it. Therefore, we can move on to the next thing. And the thing that I like to think and reflect upon is all of these sort of great things that we build on, in terms of artistic pursuits, whether it's cooking, whether it's art, illustration, there's very few components to them. And so, like, if you think about bread making or pasta, right? You've got flour, you've got yeast, you've got maybe an egg, some water, and we've been working on this for thousands of years, and we haven't exhausted it. Like, if we had mastered it, we'd be done. We wouldn't be talking about, a young person who really loves bread making and they figured out some new combination of a thing. And so the act of going back into the thing that we sort of know or have mastered to learn new things is really important, but we're not spending time there. We're just fast tracking to the final thing and saying, oh, I understand what this is. And we're see that, we're sort of graphic design is our base that everything is built from. And so you could see the same thing there, whether it's the printed page or even a digital visual design, where, well, we're dealing with these certain tools and we sort of exhausted it, but the piece of paper or the digital screen is still empty in the beginning. And so you're starting from scratch. And it's in that, what are we trying to learn? All the questions we ask in the midst of the new challenge that is there for exploration. And if we're not deeply curious, we're going to think. And I think if we're, ignorant and we don't let ourselves have the room to learn, we're going to think that we've mastered something long before we even realize that we can say, I'm a master of nothing.
Mm. How do we find that patience to stay there?
I think some young creatives see it, and I think though there is a lot of opportunity for those of us who've gone down that road to lay that groundwork, to encourage, to speak into those lives and encourage them to pursue and to go deeper. Because that's really what we're after. We're not after the fame part. What we're after is we want to be known for a thing, and spending time in the thing gives you enough level of expertise and a mastery over it and a craftsmanship over it, which then allows you to see how much you actually don't know about the thing. And that's what you're after, especially if you're a creative. That's what you're after. It's the joy of going back in over and over and not seeing as an exhaustive thing. And then how do we do that? We want to bring people around us who have a new way of thinking. We need to challenge ourselves, but I think we have an opportunity for those of us who've learned a few new things or we've given time to reflect, to share those reflections.
Yeah, I heard the word humility in there. You said something, I forgot the exact phrase, but like, we know enough to know we don't know it all.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about before on the show, like how humility, I mean, obviously part of the antidote to ego, but it's really the gateway to learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like
Absolutely.
in your space, to know that you haven't mastered it, you're not there yet, there's more to go, the iteration, maybe that helps check your ego a bit and helps actually get you further to a better product.
Yeah.
Because the ego is going to get in the way and say, I'm done, or I've mastered it.
That's right.
I got to go on. And it limits your depth.
Oh, I think it absolutely does. And I think that humility and just awareness. And so like, even when you're aware of your own biases, that's a really important step to know that, wait, I actually think a certain way about this. That's getting in the way of me thinking in a new way around the subject matter. And so your own biases, that helps you there with your own assumptions and your own ego. And then ultimately, having humility to say, to ask questions like, what don't I know about this?
Yeah.
That opens the door to so much new creativity and thought and how to kind of stitch things together in new ways.
So how do you that's a great point. How do you get around, how do you deal with, offset your biases, assumptions? Are there practices you found or?
Yeah, so I'll kind of use an example from work. And so whether recently we were called in to think about a brand that already exists. And so you can go into something like that and think, what are the players here? What is it that they've already made? And what is it that they might want to hear? And we might assume, based on the field and the subject matter, that there's sort of a limited view of what can be tolerated in order for it to do well. And so we might say, based on the owner, based on the people that are at play here, the main stakeholders, let's present creative that is expected based on our own assumptions in and around the work that they do. This happens all the time. And so our job, I see my job is really, my job isn't about design, like at the end of the day, even though people would say I'm a designer. It's not. My job is to ask great questions and to be curious and to expand the way that we think and lead clients into these spaces that are really built around their deep desires for the thing they're doing. And I think oftentimes we just lead people to the first thing that we think scratches that itch. And really, we're not actually opening the door to real possibility. Real possibility, that's where their fear comes in, because then they have to choose to do something that's different. And so that's where there can be a real rub between what the creative is bringing and then what the client is wanting to buy in the end. They may very well agree with you, but they may choose the safe road. And part of the journey now, of course, is for me is I've just realized, okay, what is it can I actually have control over? Like, I don't have control over what they're choosing necessarily or their own fear around them choosing something, but I do have control over how I can pitch it and what I'm showing them. And so I may solve it based on their own assumptions, and that'll be the first thing. That's the lowest hanging fruit. And then through discovery with them, through sitting with them, talking with them, there's so much there, and asking great questions, you begin to very quickly see that usually the people at the top, whether they're the executive, whether they're the CEOs, the entrepreneurs who started the business, the visionaries, the editor-in-chiefs, like, they have something much bigger that they want. That's why they're there in that role in the first place. But it's really hard to do something new because most often everyone who's in the middle wants to keep it safe.
Yeah.
And so how do you kind of walk in that space? And I have found real freedom in knowing that my job, like the way I've been made to do this thing, is to push and to pull and to invite and to say, hey, there are these other ways of thinking about this. And if I can use sort of all like creative mojo and the things that I've learned to bring into that, then that can be really helpful to help really, I think, persuade those who are maybe cautious, to invite them into these amazing spaces where actually freedom lives.
And we've got to get past that fear.
You have to get past the fear, regardless of what it is, whether it's you're jumping off the high dive and you decide you need to do a pencil dive, you got to get past the fear. Or I need to choose a way. Like if you're saying, our business is in a slump, we've realized that there are these 3 new activities that we want to be doing. One of them requires us to rebrand ourselves in and around our original kind of thoughts around why we even started this in the first place. Then we need to really embrace that. And when we embrace it, it can actually feel scary because you realize you've been doing the same thing for so long. Usually it's because you're protecting something. You're protecting sort of your kind of IP that exists. You're protecting your donors. You're protecting all of those things. And you don't realize that the world is going by you in the process of protecting. And this is why so many organizations can find themselves going, oh my gosh, we need to throw a Hail Mary. We need to rebrand. We need new messaging. It's because they've been waiting.
Yeah, there's a famous essay by Clay Christensen, who I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, but The Innovator's Dilemma. And it was like, once you get, I'm probably going to butcher this, but essentially once businesses get big and established and they have a way of doing things and it's produced some success, they're so afraid to then change and do something highly innovative. They know they need to, but it's going to interrupt like where they found success. But then the advantage of the new upstart is they don't have that baked in momentum, so they can come in and disrupt. And the big businesses, it's hard to do that. And I know some have done like skunk works type. It's like you're in a different building, go figure this out and do everything different. But yeah, that there's so much, momentum, safety, confirmation bias. Some of it there for a good reason, right? We found success in a certain way, and yet it hampers us from embracing the new to change and find new ground. And then, on a micro example, some of the rebrands I've been through or the creation of new brands in my life, often there's this like uncomfortableness with what the designer first proposes. And I've kind of learned like, okay, I need to lean way out over my skis and trust him or her. Not that I can't have some input, but if I control it too tightly, then it just ends up being my vision. And that's not why I'm hiring them. I'm hiring them from a new perspective and something that will push me. So that's been a fun, like leaning into that, even though it's uncomfortable, and writing that out. So.
There's a great opportunity though in that role. And I think it's this, that because I've worked with a lot of editors, the role of the editor is to kind of understand the topic, the subject matter, and push and get to the truth. And I'm just somebody who's already predisposed to doing that. And I like it when people do that with me. And so rather than be kind of really prescriptive, because I think that's where people can end up. And I'm not saying that you're doing this at all. I'm saying that in general that, the creative does the round one, and then people see it. And then sometimes people can want to be really prescriptive because of time, and there's not enough time, or they are not seeing something that matches the thing that they want to see. So rather than push in terms of asking great questions that forces the creative to think critically about the decisions that they've made. And actually it's a great gift to the creative. And I think it probably means that they probably need it a little bit more mature. But when you're calling out of them more greatness to think more about what they're doing, the logic there is that they'll move back into it. If the creative is brittle and doesn't like the sort of like being questioned, but not because they're doing it wrong, but why are they thinking the way they're thinking, then they may not be up for it, you know?
Yeah. Can I interject? Because I think this is an important point applicable to any space where you have a work product. And I actually read this example related to designers of how do you separate your ego from your work product? Mm-hmm. And I think this is what you're talking about. And so in design anyway, you hand something forward. Oh, I think it was from Creativity Inc., where they're talking about Pixar.
Yep.
And in their brain trusts, they had to get the creatives to separate, like, hey, you're putting forward a story to be picked apart. We're not picking you apart, but I understand, especially can imagine as a creative, it's like, it's very near and dear to your heart. It like came from this deep place. You're putting it forward, and then people are like attacking it and picking it apart, and you're like, whoa. But if I remember it correctly, it's like greatness is when you can separate your ego from it and say, I want the very best. I know that I need help. This is what I'm putting forward. I don't feel like you're attacking me when you're attacking, or not attacking, but when you're doing this. But so I want to hear your perspective, but I think it's true for any endeavor of, like, at least professionally, where you're putting forward something, an idea, a business, a deal, a contract, a piece of art. How can we check our egos so that, I do have skin in the game. I do care, but I don't want to care so much that I'm not willing to solicit others' help and feedback to make it the very best it can be. Like, what's that process been like for you? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I love that book. It's one of my favorite books on creativity. And I love it because Ed Catmull's writing it from somebody who is creative, but he's really running the thing.
Yeah.
And so he's got to get processes in place and structure. And so, but he really loves the creative process and understands that sort of complexity. So I think it is really true to know that we're not attacking the individual. That's where pride and ego live. Because then you feel like you're being personally attacked. Like, I don't have what it takes to do this.
Yeah.
It just means, if you can take a step back, it just means you were so excited about a thing and you worked out that idea, and it has a lot of nuance to it, but how other people read it and receive it and is different than sort of the intent. And so how do we get to your intent behind it? And when we can step back, it actually can be so fruitful. And so I think that's something that for us has been part of it's one of the reasons why we still have a physical office space. And it's one of the reasons why we were so challenged during the pandemic by everybody else who was saying, we don't need an office space anymore. Let's just go all online. Let's just all do Zoom. And as a creative, knowing myself that I need the pressure and I need other people around me to push me physically. Like, we need to inhabit the same space. And inhabiting the same space is much different than inhabiting screens that are separated, because we really aren't, like, psychologically there and present, and we receive differently. We receive context differently. We receive nuance differently. And we want to typically end the conversation sooner because it can be awkward because you're in this thing. And I really do, and firm believer that to get to great creative, or at least to have those conversations, the opportunity needs to exist to inhabit the same space. And so the way that we do that is simply like, we'll do afternoon reviews. And so we'll come around and look at the work, and we'll look at it on screen. We'll print it out, and we'll look at it physically, and we'll walk through it. And we're like, what were you thinking here? Not just like, even though I might know what the brief is, what led you to here? And asking some of these questions, like, do they know why they arrived there? Why are they doing the things they're doing? Because I need to understand it. And if I understand it, then I can better help sell that to the client, and they can help sell that to the client if they understand why. If they don't know why, then a client's going to ask a question, a very basic question, and they're going to have like a deer in the headlights.
Yep.
And that doesn't build trust.
Yep.
And so we really do need to know like the why behind everything and ask those questions. And it's much more difficult. In fact, I was an example of that is we hosted an event in DC last year, and we had a lot of it was basically an event for publication designers, all in the field at all these various titles, and even folks who were running design agencies. And a creative director and design director from a title that everybody knows was there. And we almost immediately got into a conversation exactly about this very topic. And they were frustrated because they weren't seeing a pressing into the work in a way that gave them trust that the creatives wanted to be there, or they wanted to do hard work. And so what that meant was what they found through Zoom was that we can still do work through Zoom, but it's going to sort of be okay. Like, we're not going to improve. Zoom's not going to make great strides to creative unless there's a lot of other things that are happening that a team is built specifically with the goals of the team to get great creative. And that's like few and far between. I'm sort of meandering on this answer, but there's a lot that goes into that. But I think in my experience, creative teams are not all built the same, and it requires really high emotional IQs to build creative teams to get the best out of them. And when we're running fast, we don't have much time. We end up getting frustrated because we don't know how to do that over Zoom. It's easier to do that when you're sitting next to somebody, because even the bad stuff, like your frustrations, get communicated and the person can feel it, and then they may say something, and then that sparks a conversation.
All right, I'm going to take a bit of a right turn here. I mean, one thing you said made me think about this, of knowing why, the intent behind the design. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about some of my recent experiences with AI, because it's become so easy to get output from it, but often there's no why. Like, I didn't create it necessarily. I mean, I know you do the prompt, and I'm not bashing AI, but it's like too easy to get to an output, and you may not know why. Mm-hmm. And it may be harder to then sell it to the client, or even know if it's the right solution.
That's right. Yep.
But I also want to jump way back to something you were saying earlier when we were talking about social media and being offline. And you just said, yeah, I need to kind of be in my own space, to be silent, to have solitude. And that, I think, really does get to a piece of why I'm doing this podcast, of as AI marches forward, like, what's left for the human? How do we embrace our humanness? How do we go to that? And this is why I love talking to you about this. It's like, how do we go to that deeper space within to draw upon, where it's going to be harder for AI to touch? Because I actually think, whether they know it or not, everybody's going to need to start really wrestling with this question. Because as the computers and machines get smarter and smarter, they're going to do more and more. And so I think we're going to have to dig deeper of like, it's all the things you're talking about, but it's like, how do I tap in to that very best of myself for thinking, creativity, insights, and what are the practices, beliefs? Like, how are you? I heard that earlier. I just wanted to go back and pull on that thread a little bit of, how are you doing that? And it doesn't have to be necessarily in relation to AI, but I think that's part of the conversation. But how are you really bringing originality and uniqueness? And it sounds like some of that's like unplugging, getting offline, and doing some things.
Yeah. I mean, I know everyone has their sort of different practices, and sort of an immediate answer to your question is you have to know, you have to be sort of tuned in to what you need and what your sort of body, mind, soul, spirit's sort of telling you. And that's just being tuned into it. So if we're distracted, then we're going to miss it. And we're going to miss that sort of small call. And I think that, you were talking about
small call. What is that?
It's the voice in you that's telling you, it's like it's pointing you to your true north. And that's not a loud voice. It's very quiet. And you have to be perceptive and to be able to see through all the other choices that you could possibly make that are before you at any given moment. And I would say like 90% of those aren't your true north. They're distractions. Maybe even
ego
more.
driven.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And when we don't spend time there is where we get a lot of people who are questioning themselves, usually at sort of around 27, 28, and then your mid 30s, and then your early 40s, and then your 50s. And I think that that's happening more where we're saying we don't know how, or we're just confused, or we're afraid.
Don't know how.
Like we don't know how to do that. Like who's helping us do all these things? There's a lot of people out there who are claiming to do this online through, TikTok gurus, TikTok psychologists. I mean, and it's not that the information isn't good, but there is truly something when we can slow down and have a practice and put a practice into place that we can trust, instead of like the grab bag. Oh, I listened to this person. Oh, I saw this person do this. And it's a very much kind of like how we sort of treat religion. It's just modern religion, where we believe that we can make up ourselves by the sum of all these like differing parts, and we're making things up. And we're ignoring actually, and what I believe, that we've been made for something. We've been tuned to something. And figuring that out has been a process over the millennia that's required community. It's required other people. It's required solitude. It's required hard work. It's required all these things that we don't elevate now, because the accessibility to a million different points of view is there. And it's not bad, but it's also not good. And so I believe a lot of that is a distraction, because you don't even know what to discern. So it's sort of getting back to this idea of language and sort of like, let's say that we're typing a prompt into AI, and let's say that we're an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old, and I'm doing a paper on X, Y, and Z. And you go, tell me about these things. And it gives you an awesome summary, 3 key points. And you're like, this is great, nailed it. And then you reword it for yourself. One of the challenges is, if you aren't a person, if you aren't well read, you don't know whether or not to test that against anything else.
That's right.
And so that takes time. You don't get to be well read by doing AI prompts and doing summaries. You have to spend time doing something. You don't become a great traveler by watching videos of people who are there and learning about it.
That's right.
And so you can't expect to get to a place of depth because you've watched 10 videos. There's a sort of joke about being YouTube certified. Well, it's like, oh, well, let me learn how to do a thing. Well, let me watch a YouTube video about it. Great, I'm done. Well, did you practice it? How long did you spend practicing the thing?
Right.
And so it's fair to push back. It's fair to question that. And I think a lot of people don't want to be questioned. They just want to get to next.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my staff is asking about like, what would I look for in a new hire these days, coming out of school, particularly related to AI. And it was a good thought experiment, because we are leaning into AI and we want to use it. But, quickly it was like, well, they still need to know what they're doing, because they need to know what to ask it. And then, to your point, is the result good? How are they going to know if they actually haven't learned the subject matter kind of independent?
That's right.
Of AI? How will they know whether their output is
Absolutely.
the right answer?
Yeah. So. Well, and I was thinking about this in terms of like just interior design. So I have a pretty omnivorous curiosity, and I'll just consume just about anything that I find remotely interesting. And when I think about it, just like in the interior design space, or even just house space. We were walking in a neighborhood, and there was a house that, we live in a neighborhood that's got a lot of mid-century ranches, right? And there's a lot of styles that occurred during that time, and there's a lot. There's sort of like the style, the version of that is the version. If you're going to flip into an encyclopedia and go, this is it, right? And it looked like this, and these were the pieces of furniture that were there, and this is how it was appointed inside, and that takes deep knowledge and understanding. Like, to do that requires a level of understanding of how to get that. Often you can look at a mid-century and go, oh my gosh, you got a ranch, it's mid-century. And then you look at it and you see a hodgepodge of ideas that are at work. And something you might say to the untrained eye, you're like, I really love this. And I put like tiki stuff next to mid-century stuff to colonial stuff. And then I went and I got a pot or some plants that sort of don't go with the style. And you end up with this mixed thing, but you may believe that what you're getting is sort of like an Eichler house with, Herman Miller furniture and, Ray Eames furniture and all of these other things, when in fact you're not. And so it's you don't want to be the person who's like the bearer of bad news and like, this isn't great. And the problem is that there isn't a deep understanding of the form. And that goes without saying for everything. So I think the thing that you're talking about, right, which is you might be able to be somebody who can type in a great prompt and it may look good on paper, but then the challenge is, well, does this fit what we do? Does it take in a deep understanding of our work and the work that we're trying to do in the world now contextually?
Yeah, removes some nuance and depth. What's inspiring to you these days? Where are you drawing inspiration from?
There aren't a lack of inputs for sure. I love to read. I love music, and there are a couple of things that I'm focusing on right now. One is I've been reading a piece. It's a long piece, but it's hard. It's about Leonard Bernstein and Gustav Mahler, and it's in the Atlantic. And it's kind of a fascinating piece about how it took him to rejuvenate classical music here in the West, and that there was an expectation for how composers, especially music directors and conductors, held themselves. And so at the time in the 60s, there was an expectation that you were not to be flamboyant, that you were not to be over the music, and that you needed to be sort of just still. And this piece dives into a deep dive into how, like, what made Leonard Bernstein, what were the ingredients that got him to be who he was, and then the gift of his joy for music and his drive to see it done well. And it took him going to Vienna and becoming sort of the conductor in residence in Vienna for us in the West in America to go, oh my gosh, like he's a treasure. Bring him back here. He's our treasure. So it's an amazing piece, and it's about creativity. At the end of the day, it's about creativity and his view of music and what was important to him. There's an artist. She's a Japanese musician, and she just put out an album. And I'm forgetting the name of the album. I think it's like Luminescence. And she has a couple of albums, but she's the premise of the album is that she's sort of underwater, and she's creating these worlds underwater. And it's a really beautiful. It pushes the idea of like what is classical music, because it's modern. So it's very, there's a lot of analog instruments in it, but also digital instruments in it. And so you could kind of say, well, it sounds like Sigur Rós, sounds like, bands that are very ambient, but her voice brings in this amazing human element to it that is spectacular, I think. And it's wondrous in a way that sort of draws our attention to kind of like shining stars. They just sort of twinkle and we don't know why they're doing this thing. And so it's really luminescent, I think. And the third thing the thing I'm reading is a book by Helen MacDonald called H is for Hawk. And it's really a story. It's a kind of a memoir about her losing her father. And she grew up, it sounds so weird, she's English, but she grew up in falconry and obsessed with falconry. And so the book is about coming to terms with her father's death, and then this hawk that she essentially goes and gets so that she can get back into falconry. And it's the taming, as what they call it. Instead of taming, they call it manning, because there's all these little technical terms. But it's this beautiful book about her pain and losing her father and kind of what that meant. And then sort of if this particular hawk, the breed of it is, as she describes, almost like a vampire. It's just, all it wants to do is like hunt and destroy. And so, and it's that sort of like, that's almost a mirror for her own feelings and her own, like where she is and sort of taming herself and coming to terms. And so it's this, again, it's what I'm drawn to is how we use creativity to tell story, and how these sort of pieces that don't feel like they fit together help us understand who we are as people, who we are as humans, this human experience. And they're deeply moving. And that's, I think, where we are just greatly given gifts by creatives, that the creative, if they're doing their job, draws us to beauty, the beauty that we're wanting to see in life.
What role do emotions play? My sense is that creatives have a deeper connection to emotion. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not true, but that's my sense. And that you're drawing upon that to bring out beauty in art. And I don't know, I'm wondering, it seems to be a connection to the rest of us, that I could give some examples where I see a lot of emotion being played out all the time, maybe like too much so.
Okay.
But then there's this other piece of, to go really macro, it's like, there's a lot of people wrestling with mental health out there, spiritual health. And it seems like some of it, from what I've read and heard, is maybe a lack of being in touch with your emotion and processing that correctly. But we don't have to necessarily go down the health path, but I'm wondering if there's some insights we can gain from you on what role do emotions play in your life, particularly related to creativity, but however you want to tackle it.
Yeah. I think it's a great question because it's a complicated question. In many ways, I don't think that the creative is doing anything different than the modern person. And so we're struggling with the same things that everybody else is struggling with. I think there's an expectation from our creatives that they need to be more in touch with their emotions because that's how they get to this thing. And they're certainly accessing places within themselves to express something that they need to say, show, sing about, write about. And so they're doing it in that way, but I think that emotions play a role. I don't think they play as big of a role, I think, as maybe people want to suggest. So, and what I mean by that, I'm not saying that they don't play a role, but I think that, at some point you have to harness what the thing is. So if I'm feeling sad, I want to go make sad music, or I want to write poetry. Well, you have to get outside of the feeling to begin to harness great poetry or a great song. And so you can't just go, I'm sad. You need to go, well, what's driving the sadness, or what am I getting at? And so it takes an introspection and discernment and sort of going back into the process of like, what am I hearing? What am I thinking? And asking yourself like really good questions, what else could be true if I'm sad? What else could be true about people who aren't sad? And then you start pushing up against that. And so we start getting some really great ideas. I think, Taylor Swift has mastered the breakup song and, that sort of feeling, but she uses metaphor, she uses ideas that you wouldn't put together necessarily, which all of a sudden creates new imagination. So I think more than anything, I think a curiosity about how you're feeling, but then a curiosity about how other people, how they receive it. And so empathy, I think, is a big part of the creative act, which is I might be feeling sad, but somebody might be going through the same thing and they're not. Why? And when you begin to access that, then you can set up tension around maybe how other people are mindlessly going through the motions when they should actually be behaving in a different way. And so you end up with something I think maybe that's more interesting than just sort of like I'm feeling sad about something or even angry. But I think they are the prompt to then hopefully the deeper questions after that.
So, my mind's going two ways. One, talk about power of empathy, because that's an important word.
Sure. Empathy, there's a sort of a slew of words that sit in the same space. There's sympathy, there's empathy, there's compassion. There's a fourth word. I forget what that word is. And empathy is one of those great words where so you have sympathy, which is like, oh, I hear you. That's sort of your problem, but I see you. I see that you're having a problem. I see that you're struggling. Empathy is, oh, let me put their shoes on and try to see it from their perspective. Compassion is moving towards that person and then walking alongside them in their tragedy, sadness, anger, and being actively a participant in it. And so empathy is just really important because it does force you to then go, why are they behaving this way? And so it's a reason why you can have, you can have differences between, like, if let's say that you're conservative or liberal, or just again, let me take that off the table. Okay. We're not going to go there. But I can say, like, on sort of how we think, empathy just allows us to have a greater access to an understanding of what somebody is really feeling and believing and why they want to choose the things that they're choosing. And it allows us to step into the gap with people. But even then, I think most people aren't oriented in that direction because it takes practice. So it's easy to have sympathy because it doesn't require anything of you. Empathy requires seeing somebody's perspective, but compassion is the greatest of those because it requires you to step into it. So, for example, if somebody dies, that's somebody that like their spouse died. It's one thing to sort of send a text. It's another to send a card. It's quite another to show up. And then you're like, well, what do I say? And that's where things can be dicey, but that's where the greatest amount of opportunity actually exists for growth in all directions, for healing, for beauty, for all of those things. And so when we can even move past empathy into compassion for others, then if we're creatives, really amazing things can kind of come from that. If other people are willing to go there with you, right? So this gets back to the pitching things, discovering, things with your clients. What exactly do they want to be doing? What do they want to say in the world? Are they willing to try something? Are they willing to put it on the line? There's a lot that goes into it, which is what makes it really challenging and really fun. If you're somebody like me, because you're sort of on a spectrum. And if you're at a point where I can empathize why somebody wouldn't choose the thing. And if I don't, I can get angry. And I can say that's, their decisions are really stupid. They don't understand the big picture. Or they don't know what being creative is all about. This is where we get a lot of those sort of angry temperaments flying. But when you begin to see why somebody chose something, then you can really begin to see what's at stake for them. And that's a better place to be, because when you can do that, you actually start building trust with people too. And what I have found is the more trust you can build requires empathy, the more trust they're willing to give you to be more creative. It's a sort of up is down sort of thing.
And are you trying to evoke emotion through your excuse me, through your design and creativity? Is that a part of creatives of like?
I think it has a lot to do with truth telling.
Mm,
And creatives, great art does not need to tell you what it is about. It's there to provide a prompt for you to think. And so you can come and approach something and think, I don't understand. Most people are like, either I like it or I don't like it. And they don't really get past that. But the artist's job is to prompt you to think about something, but their job isn't to tell you.
okay.
And I think that's a really important distinction. And so the great art never does that. But if you're in, let's say, a commercial art, let's say graphic design, or you're in the business of PR
or advertising, you are trying to evoke
or advertising,
emotion,
your
right?
job is to coerce, your job is to tell, your job is to tell a story a particular way, to show and be prescriptive. And so that's where in these sort of fields, it can be dicey, because if you're an artist and a creative, you're like, well, do we need to say everything? And then if you're somebody who's like paying money and you're trying to attract an audience in any way, shape, or form, you're like, well, we need to say everything, or nobody's going to get it.
Yeah.
And so that's where the trick kind of can lie. And so that's where a lot of the tension can exist. And so you can have very frustrated creatives who are doing a job and they're angry or they're bitter. And it's because they don't see the job that they're actually doing. Like maybe you should go and be an artist, like a fine artist, and not necessarily a graphic designer or a web designer or, a marketing executive, that kind of a thing. And so I think you just kind of have to choose what that is. But I think for us, our job has always been, not our job, but the way in which we see the work that we do is we want to do work that matters. And we want to do work that is worthwhile. Are the things that we're actually making worthwhile? Are they helping people? Are they drawing people to deeper things? It's not, our job isn't to be a poet, and we're not, a fine artist. And so I think we have to, if that's what we want, we need to go elsewhere for that. And so I think if you just understand that part about what your job is, that can be really helpful. But you can still do great things within that space. I think empathy for us has meant one of the great gifts that's been given to me through this work is that I actually get to be with people and talk to people and figure out and learn from them. And that, if you're into that, it can be amazing. And it can be, you can find a lot of like a gratitude in the work that way. If you're wired that way.
What role does silence play? You hit on this, but I want to just circle back around one more time, personally and professionally.
What does a role of silence play as a creative or as a person?
Either one. In your life.
For me, it's been a great gift again to me when I take the time in deep solitude and silence. I am an extrovert, but I also really enjoy being alone in sort of a weird way, in thought, because I'm able to just quiet my thoughts altogether and focus. And so when I am alone, and typically I really enjoy being outdoors, being in the woods. I find great peace in that. And I used to practice that I've put into play just this past year has been when I'm going into the woods, I'm leaving everything behind. So I'm not even bringing like, oh, let me listen to a podcast or let me listen to amazing music that's going to help me think bigger, deeper thoughts. It's actually like we're not being and having a practice of solitude when we do that. We're introducing another distraction that can actually keep us from what the purpose of solitude actually is. And it is a sense of quieting down our spirits, a sense of connecting into something that's bigger vertically, whether you're somebody who's a person of faith or not. There's a connectivity that you're after in that space of solitude, in the quieting down, the slowing down, the intentional slowing down, and hearing where you are, which is a big part of that. And so that practice has been huge for me as a creative, in that it's actually giving me more peace, to not bringing it back to the ego, to not let the ego kind of come up and drive the car, or drive the bus. And so that's been really helpful. And it's been helpful for me to meditate on the things that I'm actually in control of. I've got, we talked about kids before this. I've got two 20-year-olds. And so you begin learning, and there can be the hard way, or you can just give yourself over to it. When they get to be 12 or 13, all the way, probably for the rest of their lives now, which is, there's an element here that I don't have control over the decisions that they're making in their lives. And I have to be okay with that. And I have to create boundaries for me in and around who I'm going to be when they make decisions that I don't necessarily like. And that's a part of solitude, which allows me to quiet myself. And I spend time there actually praying. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'll just go and I'll just walk, and I'm just emptying myself. And I don't even know, like after a couple of miles, I'm like, I haven't thought about anything. And like, I've been gifted with, that's okay too. Like that time, using it isn't about getting something necessarily out of it, but it's about sort of emptying yourself into. And so that sort of right sizing that, like the purpose of solitude has been a real game changer for me.
Oh man, we could do like another hour just on this.
This has been great.
Yeah, because yes, where I'm at so much of where I'm at in my faith practice right now has been a lot about emptying.
Mm-hmm.
And just, which feels so odd, because so much of my life it's been about asking for, or saying the right thing, or asking for the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And lately it's been more about kind of no thought.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, who said the great quote? It was like talking about this person sitting with, the Lord or God. And it's like, kind of, what did you say? Nothing. What did he say? Nothing. It was just like they both were sitting there in silence.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I
I
resonate with that. Just like a lot of times it's just empty, and it's not productive, and that's so hard, because everything in our life is be productive, be productive, be productive. Yeah. Even in my thought life, be productive, and all of a sudden it's like try to be totally empty.
Yeah.
And there's no productivity, but I think there's something that
no, absolutely,
God loves about that.
I think absolutely, and I love that you brought that up, because we were in a group setting recently, and the question was asked, if God was coming over, Jesus was coming over to dinner, what would be the question you want to ask? What would be the question? And I immediately had this thought of, I actually don't want to ask him any questions, but I would just want to spend time. So the question that I would ask would be, can we make something together? I mean, he's this carpenter. Somebody in the group said, well, we don't know if he was a good carpenter. We don't know if he was like a really crappy carpenter,
but to your
or
point,
not.
It doesn't matter, right?
But I was like, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
What I wanted was the time. And like, imagine being able to spend time with anyone, whether it's Jesus, whether it's with Leonard Bernstein, whether it's with any great person who's got a practice who's a master at a thing. What does it look like to just be next to them, to even absorb and be in their space, to watch their practice? And I think we would be really surprised at sort of the level of simplicity of the process. And it's not complex. And I think we just complicate everything. And I don't know, there's something about that was very peaceful, that would be a good use of time. It wouldn't be an argument. It wouldn't be like, he knows everything anyway. What am I going to what new knowledge am I going to gain here that's actually going to help me?
Right.
You know what I mean? Rather than simply being. So.
Right. All right. Last question. Values. What values are particularly resonating with you in this season of life, or that you're leaning into?
Yeah.
And if you want to wrap in faith to that, feel free.
And I appreciate that. I think the value of wisdom and just gaining more wisdom, but I think clarifying what I know already. And I think that gets back to sort of the conversation about having not having the words, a language, a poverty of language. I think you can even get to my age and somebody can ask you a question and the expectation is that you've got it all maybe wrapped up in a bow in some sort of like very pithy thing or 3 words. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But it's amazing how much we don't actually process what we know and think about that. And so wisdom is a big part of that, in that I want to spend more time thinking about what I actually know and why, does it matter to me? What's valuable to me, and how can I put that into words so that I just understand this thing that I think that I believe. I'm not a great person like sort of on my feet with like a big idea. I'm like my wife is bullet points and she's fantastic. She's like, here's 3 bullet points, boom. And you're like, that was amazing. 30 seconds later, done. I'm like, I roll in and it takes me, I need to warm up. And then once the machine gets going, it's like, I can start making all these connections. And so, but I do know that wisdom is a big part of that. Just having a practice, like having a daily practice of kind of what's important to me, of silence, time in prayer, time just being spent being still. And something that's been really important to me. And it's weird because it kind of came out of sort of the election, but there was a lot that I didn't understand about how we got here. And so what I ended up doing was, where can I have confidence and what's true? And so that forced me into, well, what's true are, these words of Jesus. And so there's a lot of different places that I can find truth or answers to, questions that are happening right now, or even my own fears and concerns. But I've just been spending only time reading the words of Jesus. Not even and I've just spent time, I want to go through all the Gospels. And I started in December and I'm only on Matthew 18. And I've just been going over it and over it and over it and committing things to memory, which has been important to me. And I think that's been really, I don't know, I've gotten answers to things that I didn't realize I needed answers to, or I think I've been cared for in ways that I didn't know how. And it's just been really good to me.
That's good. That's inspiring. Mm-hmm. It's like walking in with open hands, and it's almost at the emptying. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm not coming with an agenda.
Yeah. Yep.
I usually have an agenda, which is limiting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. As we wrap, first, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Such a joy to have you on. And I mean, really, truly, I could go another 2 hours. Uh-huh. I love this. What would you leave everyone with? So, question, challenge, idea.
Well, since we were talking so much about creativity, I think I would want everyone to walk through a process of how they interact with creatives and why they believe the things they believe regarding creatives. So, and to question those. So when you're interacting with something that is a creative act, whether it's a film, it's music, an artist physically right there, or anything else, ask yourself great questions about what was the intent behind the thing that they were making. Why did they need to make it? What was missing from the world that caused them to want to make the thing? What were they answering that they felt needed answering? and ask great questions in and around that. I think that we would be surprised, especially when we embrace empathy, that what we'll actually discover. And just, I think, just let yourself be willing to be changed, even if you have an idea, a very certain idea about something. Letting yourself embrace empathy in the moment can be a really great gift, not just to the artist, but also to yourself.
It's great. Jose, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. This was great. Thank you.